Hi, I'm Alan Pangbourne, President and CEO of Chesapeake Gold, and our major project is Metates in Durango, Mexico, which is a massive gold and silver deposit with 19 million ounces of gold and 480 million ounces of silver. And we just put out a new resource update, Merlin, which happy to talk to you about.
Alan, thank you very much for the introduction. Good to be speaking to you again. New mineral resource estimate. Let's get straight into it. Why did you have to do a new resource estimate? Because when you already had 20 million ounces of gold, and what is new about this?
So when we first took over management of the company, we needed material for met test work, which is the whole crux behind what we're doing on the project. But when we got the results, they were 19 to 20% higher grade than the block model was predicting, which was a bit of a surprise. Nice surprise with only 5 holes, but we thought that's unusual. So we went and drilled another 18 holes and surprise, surprise, got the same sort of results again. And that was all focused on the intrusive and the intrusive breccia. When you got 23 holes that are all saying 19 to 20% higher grade, you sort of scratch your head and go, why? So we've done a whole pile of work since we put those last results out to understand why. And so 2 quite well-renowned geologists have gone through the resource, gone through the block model, rebuilt it all, reinterpreted the boundaries, put a shell on the outside so that it doesn't spread everywhere, reinterpreted some of the boundaries between the intrusive breccia and the sediments, and rerun the variograms, tighten them up a fair bit. And then those additional holes with that higher grade have obviously had an impact as well. So it was a complete rebuild.
Just to be clear, a variogram, in geostatistics, the variogram is your confidence with which you can predict what the grade is going to be away from your data point. So if you've got a drill hole here, if the variogram or the range of your semi-variogram says that you can predict what the grade is 200 meters away. What you're saying is that you've brought it in tighter. And I've seen your news release, you talk about ranges, but kind of it's about 55 to 60 meters along strike and down dip, and it's a little bit less across the structure of the ore body.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a lot tighter than it was before. Don't ask me what they were. I'm not a geologist. That's my get out of card.
But if you can confidently predict what the grade is going to be based on a lot of statistics, kind of a lot of data, that means that your drill spacing can be 50 meters, whereas this is very different to some gold deposits which are structurally controlled and very tightly constrained, which have to be drilled out on 5 or 10 meter spacing. I mean, this is a completely different animal. Yeah,
it's a large intrusive body that's come in that carries the gold and silver. There's a breccia piece on the top, and then there's some. We're not sure if it's a separate mineralization event or not, because the silver-gold ratios are different in the seds to the intrusive, so there's a bit of an overlap. And the geologists even looked at how far did it bleed into the seds before it seems to be this other mineralization event. So, you know, it is a large chunk of low grade. I mean, it's not high grade, it's a gram combined, a bit more now. But the focus has always been on that intrusive, because when we first looked at it, when you get these very large ore bodies with very large projection distances, I mean, some of search distances for measured inferred were 200 meters. That's a long way. That's a long way. Yeah.
But just to be clear, so the global resource, or the kind of the envelope of the envelope encompasses 20 million ounces. But from what I can see from the news release, you're focusing on the 5 million ounces or 4.8 million ounces that sits within the intrusive and the intrusive breccia.
That's right. That's right. It's the highest grade material. Every time you run a cone, it's the first place the mine wants to go because it comes right to the surface. So, you know, Lurch Grossman always does the same thing. Highest margin, nearest to the surface comes out first. And so that has always been the focus. And when we took over management, and I spoke with the board, that the strategy was we need to have a project that we believe we will be able to fund and build and then expand. And the PEA that we put out in August year before last, a 31-year mine life just on the intrusive is plenty. Yeah. And so that's always been the focus. You got to be in it to win it. You got to be producing to get any upside in the gold price. Sitting there otherwise doesn't do you any good.
So what you're saying is, just paraphrasing it, is you may have this huge resource, but let's focus on the 4.8 million ounces, which are going to give us the best economics that suit your company, that you can develop, that you can raise the capital for, that you can operate.
Yes. And look, if somebody wants to come and take us out for the 19 million ounces of build project, it's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just at $3 to $4 billion. If somebody could tell me how Chesapeake, at whatever our market cap is now, $100 million or something, can fund a $3 to $4 billion project and still actually own any of it, I'm all ears. But I don't know how you do that.
Do you just kind of stepping back from a bit from the project itself? Do you feel that there's a kind of a Mexico discount being applied to Chesapeake at the moment because of some of the planning issues and some of the environmental ministry, because some of the kind of anti-mining rhetoric that's out there, and not just rhetoric, some action as well?
There may be. I think there's a lot of things at play with Chesapeake. Firstly, it's an old story, and a lot of people have heard about it before, and they put it in the box of it's refractory, it's low grade, needs a ton of capital, somebody else has to buy it to build it.
Yeah.
And so it's just trading on a dollar per ounce basis. You then overlay that, we're bringing in a new technology. The mining industry is conservative at the best of times. I'm not worried about the tech because I know it works in the copper space, and we put up our proof of concept last September, and we spoke about, I think I spoke with Matt about that last time. So there's multiple things, and also from 2016 until we took over management, there was very little marketing done. Yeah, and so that put all that together, we're slowly seeing more and more interest. To give you an idea, the first year I went to Beaver Creek, we may have had 10 or 15 meetings. Last year when I went to Beaver Creek, we had 50.
Yeah.
Last May, for the first time, we got an invite to the Canaccord conference. This year, I'm going to BMO in 2 days' time. We never got an invite to BMO before.
Yep.
So we're starting to get interest. Yeah. And it just takes time. When it's been dead, getting new interest again, that, hey, this time there is a real opportunity that it will go somewhere. It's been a lot of work, but no, I think we're slowly getting there. Put out the proof of concept, great, supports the PEA. Put out the updated resource, great, supports the PEA. Yeah. And we got to keep doing that until we get to a PFS. Do
you get any questions on Mexico? Do people ask you about the title risk or the permitting risk in Mexico?
No, it's strange. I mean, you're probably the first one that's asked me about it. There's been a lot of rhetoric. There was recently, like within the last 48 hours, AMLO has started screaming about nationalization of the lithium industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. He actually mentioned that a year ago or more. You mentioned permitting risk and leases.
What was the mine that applied for a 12-year extension and got it granted, and then it was cut back down to 2?
Was it Fortuna's mine? I can't remember.
Fortuna.
Yeah, it was one of them. You know, but then the flip side, for all of the rhetoric about not approving any more open pits, all have got approved and built under this regime, under this government. You know, we've met with the Durango government back in November, which is the new administration that's just came in. I'm going to meet them again at PDAC. They're all for it. I think what you're seeing is, if you can get the community, if you can get the regional government to come hand in hand with you to Mexico City, you'll get what you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't, if you look at some of the others, there's background noise underneath that has led to some of these problems. Yeah. And so, you know, our community relations or government relations, I model off what I've seen elsewhere, where focus on your neighbor, then focus on your neighbor's neighbor, and eventually go to the capital. Not the other way around. Don't go to Mexico City and expect the Minister of Mines or Secretary of Mines or whatever he is in the federal government to go and tell the province and the local community what they have to do. It won't work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Good. I'm curious. That's interesting. Thank you for that, kind of the Mexican perspective. Coming back to Chesapeake and the metallurgical test work that you announced, kind of proof of concept last September. I think at the time you said you needed more time.
Yes.
And you said that, I think you showed in the news release, you showed that you had done 120 days of test work, but sometimes these leach things need to run longer. What's your planning on talking about the met test work? You know, have you got some announcement brewing? Is that something that's going to come this quarter? You know, where do we?
No. These columns are taking 180 days just to oxidize, then another 90 days to leach the gold and silver as a sort of standard test. So that's 9 months per column. We've got some 20 odd columns running. I've actually got a couple that have been running for over a year now, oxidizing, and I'll switch them over at some stage. So you're trading off time against capital. And unfortunately, the one thing we can't speed up is the clocks. It takes what it takes. And so even though it's slow, it is a better economic result. It's a better environmental result because it uses less power, less water, and there's no tailings dam than the alternative, which is your autoclave process. But it means the test work takes time.
I've got notes here from the last interview I did with you, which is kind of in the middle of last year, that you were in the middle of metallurgical test work and it was going to take 9 months.
Yeah.
So, and I know that, and also in September, that you've started some bigger columns. So I just
not just bigger columns, different conditions.
Not different conditions. Okay. Are you running your column heights at the same dimensions as your bench lifts will be on the pad?
No. The bench lift on the pad as designed is 7 meters. The industry as a whole these days has got a good understanding of scale up from a 3 meter, 2, 3, 4 meter column to 7, 10 meters. The copper industry's been doing it for a long time. The gold industry's been doing it on oxides for a long time. Yeah, so we know what the scale up factors are between them. The oxidation process is a dead ringer for what we did in the copper industry. Yeah. You know, we probably will need to build a pilot plant at some stage, and they will be up to full scale, just probably to satisfy the financiers more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I've just been talking to a friend of mine who ran a copper heap leach project, and he said he got the best results when he mimicked the the height of the pad, the lift on the pad to the columns. I think that's where that question came from.
We didn't for Spence, not that I remember.
Yeah.
It was all column tests, and they were 10-meter high pads. Yeah, and that was sulfide oxidation to get 80+% copper recovery. We built that in 2004. They're just running it down now and switching over to the primary sulfide flotation plant. So there's a wealth of knowledge here. I'm physically in Chile at the moment. There's a wealth of knowledge here on how to build them, operate them, what the test work looks like prior to. There's some interesting work done on on-off irrigation as well, and whether that mimics the curves or not, the differences. Unfortunately, a lot of the papers are in Spanish, but if you can read Spanish, go for it. I can.
Yeah. I can as well. But in your presentation, kind of in the appendix to your presentation, kind of in there, you've got some pretty groovy slides about kind of oxidation stuff and the non-linear relationship. And in your test work in September, you were talking about kind of a 30% oxidation. What's the optimum time oxidation relationship for your gold, or is that what you're trying to establish in your test work?
That's exactly what I'm trying to establish in my test work. And what does that, is it 2-to-1? Is it 3-to-1? Half to 1? What is the ratio between oxidation to gold recovery, gold release and silver release? The reason it's different than, and you're a geologist, the gold in the oxidation starts where the stress is highest on the crystal, right? The gold sometimes is in those stress planes, and that's where it oxidizes first. So you get a disproportionate release of gold for a release of sulfur. Yeah, sulfur goes to sulfate. And so you get this inverse dendrite, like honeycomb, going into the crystal. And
the gold can be on the microfractures.
And the gold is on the stress plane.
For a small amount of oxidation, like in September, you were reporting 30% oxidation, and it was taking your
recovery.
It was taking your gold recoveries up to 60%. Okay, and that was after 120 days. So the question is, which I guess with the rest of the test work is saying, can you get up to 70 or 75 or possibly even higher on your gold recovery by leaving it for a bit longer?
And that's an economic trade-off, right?
Yeah.
Because what's the incremental recovery? How does that increase the size of my pad? Sulfur and sulfur neutralization. Because if I oxidize another kilo of sulfur, I've got to neutralize it, which is alkali consumption. So it's a reagent cost, capital cost to make the pad bigger, and time, working capital.
And time, the time value of money, the working capital.
That's right, yeah. So all three of those come into play. Again, going back to my experience in the copper industry where we were doing this, the pad at Spence was designed to run for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right. So, but it's linear, and to get every atom of copper you get 2 atoms of copper for 1 atom of sulfur, right? Because it was chalcocite, some covellite, which is 1-to-1, and you've got to break that sulfur to get the copper. Fortunately, in the case of the pyrite, gold isn't in there as gold sulfide, so you don't have to break a bond. You just have to expose it. And the gold atom causes stress in the crystal. Right? Now, you're a geologist. All pyrites are not equal, or all iron sulfides are not equal. Okay? You can go everywhere from those beautiful cubic crystals you can get in Spain. Yeah, and if I was in Canada, I'd show you the different ones, because I've got a sample of each one.
Yeah, I've got some here as well.
So you can get those beautiful cubes. those damn things are as stable as, yeah, and they take forever to oxidize because there's no stress in the tube, right?
Yeah.
You can switch to marcasite, right, which is quite common in the UK. You get those nodules. That stuff, you leave it on your desk with a bit of humidity around, and it's got a white powder on it in 3 months. Pyrrhotite, it's called pyrrhotite for a reason, right? And so but it's all stress.
Yeah.
It's how's the crystal formed and how stressed it is. The more stressed it is, the faster it will oxidize. So there's a mineralogical formation piece to it as well. And that's why you can't just apply it willy-nilly to any pyrite refractory deposit. You do need to test it first to understand how fast it's going to oxidize.
Right, we've thrown ourselves into a rabbit hole. We've now got to pull ourselves back out.
But it's fun. Sorry, Will.
So let's talk about what this year holds for the company. And particularly, I mean, you're not alone. 2022 was a pretty tough year for resource stocks. Gold stocks in particular have had a pretty tough time. Many gold stocks have had a rebound in the last couple of months as the gold price came up from 1650 to 1950 and went back down a bit. But let's talk about how you think you're going to get that share price moving in that direction rather than steady or down.
Get the story out. Talk to you. Talk to others. Talk to anybody and everybody I can. I think I mentioned I'm going to BMO in 2 days. First time ever.
Yeah.
Different investor base. We've been changing some of the companies that we use to help us with IR to get focused on a different investor base, to find those investors that this story intrigues. It's a very different story. Yeah, it's not an exploration story. You're not going to see some whiz-bang drill results in 3 weeks' time. That's not what it is. I know where the elephant is. It's dead. It's sitting in the ground. We've just updated the resource. I don't need to do much more drilling on it, if any. It all comes back now to just put your head down and do the work you need to do to have the information to support the PFS, which we expect to do in 2024. And we're doing that.
So
we're doing all that.
Let's unpack that a bit
too. Sure.
Let's unpack that PFS 2024. So what are the elements of work that you need to do in this year to contribute to a PFS in 2024, and when is it going to come in 2024?
So things we need: environmental monitoring, because it's not just the PFS. You've got to set up for what you then do with that PFS.
Yeah.
Okay. So the PFS will allow me to start the permitting process, which is another how long is a piece of string. But to be able to do the permitting process, what they first do is they review your permit application and check, have you got certain things? And two of the key things they look for is water supply, clear title, and access, and a exploitation agreement with the local communities. Okay? So that when you roll that back, it can take you a couple of years negotiating with the local community to get what you need for everybody to be happy and get that exploitation agreement. So we started that. We started it in November. I had the first meeting we've ever had with the president and the secretary of the local community. We're going back down in March, April time to have another meeting with them. They had some requests. We're getting some stuff sorted out. Go back, sit down, have another chat, explain everything to them, start working on the community. We want to do this. You want to do this. How do we do it? How does it all work? What do you get out of it? What do we get out of it? Same with the local government, with the Durango government. That takes time. The other thing you've got to have, otherwise your permit application will be sent back to you, is clear water. Yeah. I've been through this.
What do you mean by that?
Do you have extraction water rights to satisfy the project? Yes or no. You can't wave your arms. It won't work.
Okay.
Right?
So
we're working on those two things. We're working on the environmental monitoring. So I've got continuous environmental monitoring for the previous couple of years at least. Yeah. Now we've got a lot of old data from before that we can tie this into as well. So that's not a problem. Power supply. Where's it coming from? How's it going to get to site? And is there a different permit you need to bring in the power line? Yeah. Fortunately, when we found out when we went down to site 18 months ago, there's already a power line to the little village nearby. It's not big enough for what we want, but the access way is there. The access way has already been negotiated, so it's an upgrade, not a start from scratch. So it's getting your head around all of those other bits and pieces that you need to have in place. Yeah, one of the problems the industry suffers from, particularly the junior end of it, they go to an engineering company to do a PFS. Straight after they finish the PEA, and the engineering company says, so what do I use? Have you got any new topo? No, I'll go and get some. It doesn't just fall out of the trees. Have you got any new metallurgical test work? No, use what you had last time. And it takes them way longer than it should because they go back and around and do it again.
Yeah.
I've done it enough times. I know what I need at each stage. And if you work inside the majors, and by majors, I mean the true majors, the BHPs, the Rios, the Valets, they actually have a very prescriptive checklist. Have you got for each stage, right? So you'll hear them talk about toll gating or stage gating or whatever. There's a very clear list of, guys, you got to have all this stuff. Because what people forget is a study, whichever one, PEA, PFS, FS, they produce two things. They obviously produce something that you can put into the market and go, ta-da, here's what my project looks like now. What it also produces is a list of things that you need more definition of.
Yeah, a list of recommendations, the gap analysis. It's exactly all the...
Right. So if you've got a list of all these things that you need for the next one, how can you go straight into starting the next study?
Yeah.
The junior end of the market does it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't. You do all this other work first. And that's what we're doing this year.
And that's what Crux and Crux investors kind of trying to do, is trying to highlight the gaps. You know, this is actually, these things take time. These are business development. It's a process, and typically it's just things like if you look at most junior company presentations, they don't include the financing time element. You know, there's typically a time required to get your mine financed, get your mine permitted, which is not always accurately reflected in the junior mining timelines. So,
and permitting is a piece of string. How long is it going to take?
Yeah.
Depends on how good your permit application is, and do you actually have all the data that they're going to look for? Did you do noise? Did you do dust? Did you do water? Did you do ARD test work? Is all that stuff there?
Do you envisage any infill drilling and kind of resource upgrade? Have you got for your mine plan? Have you got any kind of geotech work? Resource infill, kind of resource reclassification that is required? If
you look at the gaps, most of the intrusive breccia is already M&I.
Right.
It's more SEDs that are inferred. And, you know, given our focus is on that first piece,
yeah.
Why would I go drill year 50 resource? There's no point.
Yep. No. Okay.
So, you know, there'll be a stage where you go and infill drill before you start mining, right? I really want a couple of years, at least 3 years, well measured, before I start digging the hole. And again, it comes back to that: know where you need to be and when you need to spend that money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah?
There's no point thinking about the detail of your mine until you've got some economics around it, which is going to depend on the metallurgical test work and your recoveries.
Yeah.
Because you could probably go out tomorrow and work out what the cost per ton of moving dirt is, but the economic side, the recoveries, your gold and silver recoveries, are contingent on the test work that's in process at the moment.
And they have a big effect on the economics.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So, thank you. I understand kind of exactly where you are, which is you're keen to wear out some shoe leather, going around the market, telling the world about the upgraded resource base. The grade has gone up 16%. You've got some indicative metallurgical test work, which suggests that you've got at least 60% gold recovery and at least 50% silver recovery. Yeah. You've got column test work ongoing, and at some stage during the course of 2023 ? You're going to come back and tell us what that's about.
Yes, that's right. And we're doing environmental, communities, power, water, roads, all of that underlying data collection that you need to have to actually be able to say this is a reserve, and then be able to put the permit application together.
Alan, I know that you had a bunch of meetings in Beaver Creek 6 months ago, but since the gold price popped up about 2 months ago, what's the tone of the conversation with the institutions been? What have they said to you that they need to see before they engage or buy on market or indeed wait for the next placement?
It was interesting. They sort of accepted quite well the proof of concept. Yeah. I went to the Scotia conference in November, I think it was. And so, it was, well, what's next? What's the next steps? How much money you got? was a common question, which is fine because we're still in the mid to high $20 million range. We're just under 30 somewhere. It was the last public number we released. And our burn rate isn't high because we're not doing a lot of drilling. That's where you spend a lot of money really fast. Slowly I'm getting more and more interest from institutions. Test work results always comes up, and the other one is, are you going to build a pilot plant? And I'm not a big fan of pilot plants, but if that's what makes the world happy, I'll build a pilot plant.
When would you make that decision, do you think?
Feasibility study. Probably post-fees, actually. So tie it into financing with the feasibility study. Yeah.
Alan, thank you very much for the update. That's great. I look forward to seeing you at PDAC. I'm sure you'll be super busy, but I'll come by and try and shake your hand at the booth.
We're not having a booth. I don't see a lot of benefit from them. So I'll be at PDAC after BMO, and more than happy to try and find you. We can catch up and maybe have a coffee.
Good stuff. Anyway, good luck in the meetings, and congratulations on the resource update, the resource upgrade today.
Thank you.